Want to use a PGR in your cereals but have no time for a separate pass? Manipulator PGR can be applied as early as one tiller. Just add it to your herbicide to reduce lodging, increase harvest efficiency, and maximize yields. Talk to your retailer for more info and to confirm acceptable tank mixes.
I'm Shaun Haney, and this is RealAg on the Weekend. Let's get real and get connected with the week that was in Canadian agriculture. RealAg on the Weekend starts now. Welcome to RealAg on the Weekend here on 650 CKOM and 980 CJME. I'm your host, Shaun Haney of RealAgriculture.com. Hey, make sure you do go to RealAgriculture.com and check out all the great interviews and opinion columns we're posting there on a daily basis. Our team from across Canada does a great job of keeping you up to date on all the things and providing insight into the things that are impacting your farm business in Saskatchewan and really across the country. And if you aren't getting our e-newsletters that are sent out on a daily basis, our Western, like for example, our Western email, it goes out 6 days a week, Monday through Saturday. The only day we take off is Sunday, but you get 6 emails in a week, and it's in your inbox first thing in the morning, and you get all the information on things you need to keep abreast with that are happening out there in the busy, busy world of agriculture. Today on RealAg on the Weekend, we're going to hear from Jeremy Boychyn of Alberta Grains talking about this new fusarium map. And what's different is actually it's a Western Canadian map. In the old days, like previous to this year, we would have a map for each province, and if you were smart enough to like copy and paste and match and put the provinces together, the zones didn't match up. How silly is that? Well, now we've got a Western Canadian map, and Jeremy's going to talk about that. We're also going to hear from Sarah Healy. She is with Stratus Ag Research. They've got a new syndicated study out looking at the use and attitudes around biostimulants. Of course, we're seeing a lot of biologicals in the marketplace. Probably a lot of you have tried them. Some of you have thought about it. Well, what are our farmers doing in 2024 compared to prior years when it comes to the use of biostimulants? We're going to hear from Justine Hendricks. She's the CEO of Farm Credit Canada. There's a bit of a shift in strategy for Farm Credit. They're going to be participating directly as an ag venture capital firm, and they're putting together a team across the country. Previously, Farm Credit Canada basically did fund to fund. So they would allocate venture capital that would go to another venture capital firm, and they would deploy the investment. Well, Farm Credit's still going to do that, but they're also going to be doing it directly as well. We're going to hear from Justine the why of that and what are some of the key success points in this new venture for them. And we're going to wrap up with something very, very important at this time of the year as everyone's hitting the field. We're going to hear from Robin Anderson of CASA to talk about Kids FarmSafe Week. So very, very important topic there as well. If you have any feedback on this show, we would love to hear from you. Is there something that you hear that you disagree with, you want to build upon? Maybe you got some more questions or perspectives. I want to hear from you. You can send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. You can find Real Agriculture across all the different social media platforms. Or if you're so inclined, we'd love to hear from you in the RealAg feedback line. You dial this number, you press the number 3, and you leave me a message. That number is 855-776-6147. Let's hear from the agronomy manager of Alberta Grains, Jeremy Boychyn, talking about this new fusarium map for Western Canada.
Yeah, this is exciting. Okay, so I don't know, Shaun, did you ever look at the Alberta or Saskatchewan? I assume you did look at the Saskatchewan and Alberta and Manitoba fusarium head blight risk map previously?
Yes, I have.
Yeah, so if you looked and you actually compared them side to side, like where the borders attached, right, between Alberta and Saskatchewan, if you lined up those risk maps, they didn't actually align. Why is that? You know, if you're farming on that border of Saskatchewan and Alberta or Saskatchewan and Manitoba, and you're seeing that difference, like what's going on there? So each province was really implementing their own kind of algorithm to determine what the risk of fusarium head blight was. And knowing that this was a challenge for many producers, we were trying to get a grasp and lay on those borders, but also making sure we're consistent across Western Canada for all producers. There was some research put into the U of M, which is Dr. Paul Bullock, who is leading this through the Integrated Crop Agronomy Cluster. So this is funded by Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada, Brewing and Malt Barley Institute, SAS Barley, SAS Wheat, WGRF, Alberta Grains, Manitoba Crop Alliance, and the Prairie Oak Growers. So all of these groups are going, we need a better solution to this. So Dr. Bullock has, over the past 3 years, done a bunch of field testing. I think they mentioned 80 different combinations of different weather patterns and 1,800 plots over those 3 years. And they've developed this new fusarium head blight risk map, which is can be found at prairiefhb.ca. So if you take a look at that website, it's actually now one algorithm for the entire Western prairies, or for Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba. So you can get a clear idea of what the risk is there. So a big amount of work, investment from all groups, and huge value back to producers, and having that risk map, doubling down with doing those in the field actual on ground checks to confirm that helps producers make better decisions for mitigating fusarium headwind. So great tool.
Yeah, it seems
check it out.
Seems like a great example of like common sense prevailing. To be honest, like really, like why would we have individual provincial? Like it should be all looked at from a Western Canadian for the prairie perspective.
Well, you know how it is, Shaun. People start at different paces, and there's a system already in place, and this is where we think it's best aligned with our environment, and you get this patchwork that happens, and then, yes, it's the common sense of, okay, we need to bring this together and create some consistency. So great work on all of those parties for seeing that, funding that, and for Dr. Bullock and his team to pull that together and provide that for Western Canadian producers.
That was Jeremy Boychyn of Alberta Grains talking about this new Western Canadian fusarium map. Good stuff. Great to see the provinces working together on something like that. Okay, when we come back here on RealAg on the Weekend, we're going to hear from Sarah Healy. We're talking about the use and the attitudes around biostimulants. You're listening to RealAg on the Weekend here on 650 CKOM and 980 CJME.
If you're involved in the agriculture industry, it's important to stay informed on all the latest issues affecting your business. At RealAgriculture.com, we offer fast, reliable news, information, and insights to help you keep on top of all of the latest in Canadian agriculture. Visit RealAgriculture.com and sign up for our free daily newsletter covering everything from news, agronomy, animal agriculture, and much more. Visit RealAgriculture.com/subscribe today.
There's a reason we call it the Corn School. Videos on everything from planter setup to weed control, field trial results, and the latest yield strategies. The Corn School on RealAgriculture.com has the information and advice you need to help you succeed. Brought to you by Pride Seeds and BASF. Corn School episodes are available at cornschool.com, from RealAgriculture.com, or as a podcast in your favorite podcast app. Check out the latest Corn School episode today.
New Oxbow cereal broadleaf herbicide from New Farm is powered by Duplasan technology that is a workhorse on resistant kochia and other tough weeds in wheat and barley.
A lot of interest out there in Canada and the U.S. when it comes to biostimulants, but are some of the attitudes and perceptions and the use of them changing in comparison to past years? Here to break that down, based on a new piece of great market research, is Sarah Healy. She is a market research manager at Stratus Ag Research. Sarah, great to have you on the show here.
Yeah, thanks, Shaun. Great to be here.
Okay, so I guess before we get into some of the attitudes and the behaviors, from a use standpoint, are the use of biostimulants in Canada and the U.S. on the rise?
So looking at trends from 22 to 23, specifically in Canada, it looks like use was the same as it was in 2022. So about 23% of the growers that we spoke to in 23 said that they were using a biostimulant, which was almost exactly the same as use back in 2022. A little bit of change within categories. We saw a bit of a drop in the number of people using the nitrogen fixing category, but overall use was pretty stable year over year.
Okay, how about in the U.S.?
In the U.S., a little bit less. Yeah, not a significant drop, but slightly lower in 23 than versus 22 in terms of use. Yeah.
Well, and maybe we should back up a little bit. How many categories are there?
Well, that's the thing. I mean, we at Stratus, or myself, I put them into the categories of nitrogen fixing, which I think stands out on its own because it's such a big category. Beneficial bacteria and fungi, the protein hydrolysate amino acid, plant extracts, and organic acids. That's how we've separated them. That's by no means the only way that we can dice this. You know, there are other categories that aren't included in there, like PGRs or biochemicals. But in our studies, that's the way that we've broken it down. And that's, I think, what brings a lot of uncertainty to the category, because there's so many different products and different ways that you can slice this. So, yeah.
Yeah. Any indication, is that slowing at all? Because I agree, there is a lot of different companies in this arena. Are we tapping out yet on new entrants, or is it still growing?
I think it's still growing because there's all of this innovation that's going into combinations of ingredients, right? Like I've mentioned those categories, but a lot of the time you'll have a biostimulant that has multiple of those ingredients in one, so they don't neatly fit into one category or the other. You'll have an organic acid combined with a seaweed extract or a protein hydrolysate. So there really is no limit to the innovation there, where companies can keep testing different combinations of ingredients to come up with a different product. So,
and how do growers feel that biostimulants are performing in the field? Did you measure satisfaction?
We did, yeah. So I think the one thing that we saw this year was that attitudes are improving. We can see that. We can say that compared to 2022, there's more positive attitudes toward the category, but satisfaction is still much lower compared to traditional crop inputs. So when we look at the satisfaction or the number of growers who are saying they don't know, or they give it a neutral rating out of 5, is still much higher compared to some of the more traditional crop inputs, like a corn herbicide or a soybean fungicide. So there seems to be still this gap in performance versus expectation for these products amongst growers. There's a lot of uncertainty in the category that we still haven't moved past that. I think we've moved past the snake oil era of biostimulants, where growers understand the value of this technology. They're no longer questioning, the validity of the science, but they're not seeing the performance in the field that's going to prolong their use and their commitment to these products over the next 2, 3, 5 years.
And is yield the ultimate piece of measurement here that growers are using?
Well, from hundreds of studies that we do at Stratus on crop inputs, we know what matters most to farmers is performance, however that's defined in a given market. So, they're going to be looking for yield, they're going to be looking for that performance, but because of that gap and what does that performance look like, because they're focused on ROI, a lot of the people who are using these products are new to biostimulants. And so, you get that nitrogen fixing category where growers are looking at this product and they're associating the nitrogen with yield. And then when they use that product and they're not seeing that yield bump that they typically see associated with nitrogen, they're not going to be happy with the performance that they see. So it's sort of like, are we going to have to wait until the product performance from the companies improves, or are growers going to have to start adjusting their own expectations of what performance looks like in the field, or what ROI looks like to them in the field?
In meeting with a lot of companies in this biostimulant arena, the word consistency comes up a lot. Is that, it's not that they don't work or they don't produce the results that growers are looking for. It's the consistency that seems to be a bit of a missing piece here. Is that what you're finding in your research?
Yeah, and I think it's a lot of the messaging surrounding the best time to use one of these products can be confusing, because with a biostimulant, not all applications at all timings is going to be the best scenario. And so I know a lot of companies have these two options. I keep going back to the nitrogen fixing category just because it's such a big one, but you have the option of reducing your nitrogen fertilizer and maintaining the same yield, or keeping your nitrogen fertilizer the same and getting that yield bump. And so there was that option there. And from our research, growers are saying, yeah, they're not ready to reduce their nitrogen fertilizer and rely on this technology. There's too much risk there. But now some of the companies are saying that without reducing your nitrogen fertilizer rate, you may not see the consistent yield bump that you would, right? Because if there's no limiting factor, if nitrogen isn't a limiting factor, there's only so much that the bacteria can do. And so it's a little bit harder where something like a herbicide, it kills a weed. It's very consistent, right? You can see the performance year over year. Whereas sometimes with a biostimulant, even, a seaweed extract or an amino acid, it's going to perform better when the crop is under stress or when the conditions are not ideal, when there is no limiting factor, right? So you're right. It's much more difficult to see consistent performance if it varies when you should or shouldn't apply some of these products, which is kind of similar to fungicide applications, right? You're not always going to apply a fungicide. So,
yeah. Any indication how we see in both Canada and the US, there's some incentive programs for growers to, and I'll fixate on nitrogen fixation here. Because both governments are trying to get farmers to potentially, they're focused on fertilizer emissions, right? So are those incentives driving growers to at least attempt to try some of these products?
Are you thinking more like carbon credits, or are you thinking like the
financial incentives, like basically some of the cost of the product being
yes. Yeah, so we ask. So that's one of the questions that we've asked in our research, whether or not your confidence in the product would be impacted if you had that yield guarantee from the company. And yes, the majority of growers are saying, yes, it would increase their confidence, but I think it depends on what the yield guarantee is, because a lot of times it's work, right? You have to make sure that you've got, your yield monitor going and it's very specific what you have to do in order to get that financial compensation. And sometimes it's product that you get back, not money. So I think that sometimes is a deterrent, but I do think that it helps increase the confidence in the grower to know that the company is saying, yeah, I'm going to stand by the performance of my product. And so we do see that. It's just a matter of, leaving a check strip and making sure that you're actually following through with what you need to do to get that yield guarantee back. So,
of course, across a lot of these categories, everyone's focused on corn because that's what happens in our industry. There's 90 million acres of it, and there's a lot of money flowing into it.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of other crops that are grown as well. As you look at the uptake of use of biostimulants across the different crop types in Canada and the US, are some crops faring better than others when it comes to the use of biostimulants?
Well, the use of biostimulants, really started in specialty crops, and that is where you have the most experience with growers who've been using these products for several years, and why we see satisfaction slightly higher with something like an organic acid or a seaweed extract in these specialty markets. There's more opportunities for application. There's more opportunity to get into the field and see those results. So that and the expectation there, because some of these specialty crop growers have been using these products for so many years, they know what to expect in terms of plant health and crop stress tolerance. But I would say, corn seems to be the major crop where we're seeing that shift into broadacre. So yes, we do see use on wheat. Yes, we do see use in soybeans, but soybeans are a little bit of a different beast because you've got your nodulator and the other beneficial bacteria that have been used and those inoculants in soybeans for so many years. Potatoes is another one where we see a lot of use of biostimulants and a lot of success, especially with the nitrogen fixing category as well. But I think that lately, it has been corn that has been such a focus.
That is Sarah Healy. She is with Stratus Ag Research, talking about their study on the use of biostimulants. There's more to that interview. I encourage you to go to RealAgriculture.com and, of course, listen to the entire interview. When we come back here on Real Ag on the Weekend on 650 CQM and 980 CGME, we're going to hear from the CEO of Farm Credit Canada right after this. Get all the information you need to keep your pulse crop healthy and profitable with the Pulse School on RealAgriculture.com. The Pulse School is a free YouTube video series covering agronomy, research, and more across a host of different pulse crops. It's also available as an audio podcast wherever you download or stream your favorite podcast. Check us out on YouTube or visit RealAgriculture.com. The Pulse School, brought to you by BSF Canada.
The Canola School on RealAgriculture.com is your one-stop shop for everything a canola grower needs. Check out our free video series on YouTube for all the latest in canola agronomy, research, marketing, and more. Don't have time to watch? Download the podcast version of the Canola School on RealAgriculture.com or anywhere you download your podcasts. Stay on top of all things canola with the Canola School on RealAgriculture.com, brought to you by BASF and Invigor Hybrid Canola.
Joined right now by the Chief Executive Officer of Farm Credit Canada is Justine Hendricks. Hey, Justine, how are you doing?
I'm pretty good. How are you, Shaun?
Pretty good. It's been kind of wet out
I know.
in the east. What's
I know.
going on?
I know, but some of that wetness went to the prairies, and that's a super good sign. So I'm not complaining. I'm sure you're not either.
Amen. Not at all. It's nice to see some green hills around here. Absolutely.
I can, for sure.
Okay, I wanted to talk to you today because I wanted to get a better understanding on the shift that Farm Credit Canada is currently under. We heard about this pre-budget, and it was definitely made, I guess, a little bit more clear in the budget, but I think there's some stuff to dig in here. When we talk about FCC taking on more risk,
Yep.
What does that actually mean?
Yeah. So I guess the last time you and I spoke was when it was a Future Food Conference, right? Yeah. And we laid out there kind of some of our commitments we had in terms of renewed focus on the industry. But before I get to the budget, Shaun, I just want to reiterate one thing that I think is super, super important. It's to remember for the last 60 plus years where FCC is operated, we've been the dedicated lender to the primary ag and food industry, full stop. And that's not changing, period, right? So what we've been embarking on in the last year and supported by some of the announcements in the budget is this recognition we've consulted across the country with clients, stakeholders, you name it, in terms of as the needs of the industry are changing, whether it's because of different weather patterns, whether it's the required investments because we know we require more innovation, we want to continue to improve productivity. What does an organization like FCC do in order to continue to play the role that it always has? So that's kind of really where it starts. And that's why that shift that you're talking about, maybe what I'd say instead of a shift, it's an expansion, because what we've always done isn't going away, which is being that senior secured lender there to make sure that we're there when our customers across the value chain are looking to operate within this amazing industry.
Okay, so what is this expansion then? Where is FCC diving into now in the financial space that maybe you weren't previously?
Yeah, no. So I think we talked about it a bit the last time, but it was early stages. For one is we've been for the last, 15 years doing a bit of venture capital, and we've put in over $500 million, but it's been from a fund to a fund, right? That we've invested. One of those changes or that expansion is now we're going to start going direct into the ecosystem. So doing some private equity. We're not going to do it all on our own. We'll have partners alongside in order to do it. But that'd be an example of this expansion that you're talking about. And again, it was as a result of stakeholders across the country saying, listen, FCC, you can play a big part in helping the ecosystem at all the different stages of companies, particularly on the innovation side. So why don't you come on board and expand beyond what you've been doing fund to fund? So that's kind of an example of something that's going to be different that we didn't do before.
So does that mean that in the pre-FCC doing this, is there a lack of venture capital then? Are you backfilling, or there's a void here that you see, where why say, hey, FCC, it'd be great if you participated here?
Yeah, no, I think there is. So void, or I'd say there's a need to have more players at the table. There's lots of data that shows that, I mean, if you put in a couple of factors, right? Combine the need to constantly innovate, which this sector is known for. Combine the need for improving productivity, which I'd say is a Canadian thing, but that also applies to the sector. Combined with a need that we're a net exporter of the goods we grow in this country, and we want to continue to keep that position. In order to do that, and in response to some of the new realities with different weather patterns, there are some pretty significant dollars that are required to continue to support this industry. That's where, hey, FCC, you've dabbled in some areas of it. It'd be great if you were a bigger player amongst other players in these different spaces. So that's how we're expanding some of the product suite that we currently offer.
Any specific focuses? Is this about ag tech and productivity, or is this about processing? You know, I know the food side of the industry is, you've talked, you know, yourself and JP Gervais and others have talked a lot about that space. So where are the focuses?
So when we did our research in terms of identifying in the market where was the greatest need, one of the conclusions we came to, Shaun, is probably we need to be involved in all aspects of it. The challenge we're going to have is we can't do that from day one. Right. So what I would say is first is we're going to start doing things in partnerships, because we know that there's funds out there that do some really cool work. So going alongside them and going directly and leveraging their strategies is going to be step one. We basically need to build out the team, quite frankly, get the capacity, and then we'll be able to start to operate at the different levels. I also want to add, Shaun, I think it's worthwhile for your audience. So there's private equity, but there's also different forms of capital, right? Whether you talk about sub-debt and others. And over time, that too, as we recognize, is probably needs to be part of the suite of what we have to offer. Very much over, I'll say, the next 12 to 24 months, we're going to want to build the skills in-house to be able to really deliver on that. But over time, you'd probably see us involved in all stages.
So what are the KPIs, the key performance indicators here? What does success look like for Farm Credit Canada in this space?
I'd almost think that you've been talking to my head of strategy before, where you and I having this chat, Shaun, and she's looking to test me live in front of your audience. Listen, I'll tell you two things, Shaun. One of the KPIs is how much capital we can deploy, full stop, right? Okay. And you talked a bit about the budget, but you know, the ability for an FCC to deploy more capital in some of these spaces is definitely one of the KPIs. But and you know, without going through the details of each and every one of them, if you allow me, I'll just take one as an example in terms of how we're thinking about it a bit differently. So one of the areas where we definitely want to put more investment is in young farmers, right? We know critical in terms of the transition. We all know kind of the realities of entering into the space is becoming more and more unattainable. So how does an FCC and others kind of have the right product suite to support them? So our definition of a young farmer is a farmer that's under 40, right? And up until now, we'd measured the success of it. And that KPI was how many more farmers under 40 does FCC support? I can tell you, we probably have the bulk involvement in the market. But as we were looking at the strategy and saying, hey, how can we really know if we're having the impact we want? Maybe what we need to look at is the farmer that was under 40, is he or she still farming at 45?
Right.
And you know what I mean? So that would be a KPI that we would start to want to look at, because, you know, you could suggest that us coming in with capital is probably the easy part of the equation, more or less. But us being there for the long run and being able to say, hey, the dollar we put in 2 years ago has resulted in this customer remaining in farming, increasing the land that they farm, whatever it is, I think becomes a much bigger testament to where our impact is. So that's some of the KPIs that we're starting to think about. We haven't put them all on paper yet, but it's kind of part of that thinking that we want to apply. So I think we'll be in a better position to measure truly the difference that we make in this sector.
Yeah, and any investor they have a timeline in mind that they need to get a return from, right? And so there's non-patient capital and there's patient capital. And I don't want to put words in your mouth, but my estimation would be is that farm credit, in terms of how long it can take to get from, concept to commercialization to truly scalability, requires patient capital. That is something that I think you would probably bring to the market that would be different than maybe some of the other players.
Yeah, no, it's you've done good homework, Shaun, and you got good experience. I mean, and that's where, if you look at some of the sister financial crowns, that's part of the reputation we build over time in the market is, yes, part of our job is to be patient, right? And to really work with those companies. I think if we go back to the private equity side on specifically as an example, I think with FCC and what's going to be part of the strategy is really making sure that we can be an active player in the ecosystem. So what do I mean by that? It's one thing to be there at the early stage for the company as they're looking to commercialize, right, or seed capital and so forth. But from a Canadian point of view, how do you support the tech company or the ag tech company that comes out of British Columbia to be able to go across the country faster? Well, FCC can be huge in terms of connecting that company to different clients that can actually test the technology, hopefully help it commercialize faster, hopefully then make that company maybe sell to other bigger, large Canadian corporates, there's a lot of written material on that in terms of some of the challenges in Canada with Canadian tech, and then add the ag tech. So I'd say one of the differentiator we're going to have is we're going to want to play in both of those areas, not just supplying the capital, but if I may, helping that capital become successful.
That is Justine Hendricks. She's the CEO of Farm Credit Canada, of course, based in Regina, Saskatchewan. When we come back here on RealAg on the weekend, we're going to talk about Farm Safe Week for kids. We're going to hear from Robin Anderson of CASA right after this. You're listening to 650 CKOM and 980 CGME, and of course, it's RealAg on the weekend.
I'm Lindsay Smith from RealAgriculture.com. Join me Monday nights for The Agronomists, a 1-hour live and interactive show broadcast across YouTube, Facebook, and X. Monday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern, I host expert agronomists from all over the country to give you answers to some of the toughest agronomic questions. Join us live or catch the replay Tuesday morning. That's The Agronomists with me, Lindsay Smith, Monday nights live at 8 p.m. Eastern.
Hi, I'm Bernard Tobin, host of the Soybean School on RealAgriculture.com. Throughout the year, on the Soybean School, we'll bring you timely agronomic video content from planting to harvest, from the latest agronomic research to the latest in production technology. Check out our massive video library on YouTube, RealAgriculture.com, or download the audio podcast versions wherever you get your podcasts. The Soybean School is brought to you by BASF and Syngenta Canada.
Up next here on RealAg on the weekend, we're going to hear a piece of an interview that Lindsay Smith of Real Agriculture did with Robin Anderson of CASA talking about Kids Farm Safe Week.
So this is an exciting week. This week marks the inaugural, and I want to get this right, Kids Farm Safe Week offered by CASA. Robin, what is Kids Farm Safe Week all about?
Well, we're so excited that it's the first annual Kids Farm Safe Week. Farm families are made up of course, the farmers and the farm workers, and of course, children. So keeping that future of agriculture safe is really important, to everybody and to CASA and to our farm families, farming communities. We've seen some statistics that have come out that have been a little bit disheartening. The Canadian Agriculture Injury Reporting data came out in 2020, and we saw that children ages 0 to 4, the rates of them being killed in agriculture-related incidences is higher than any other age group under the age of 60. And that's really distressing. And in order to address that, we really wanted to, highlight how important it is to keep that future of agriculture safe, thriving, and happy. And of course, those are the young people on our farms that live there, that might come to visit, that sometimes that's where they play, that's where they grow up. And that's what Kids FarmSafe Week is really all about.
It's such a key point that you bring up that, as farm families, we may have taken, let's say, precautions with our own kids. We may, have made it clear what the rules are, have designated play spaces, etc. But often we have friends that come to visit, or we have, a birthday party, or we have, people that come in that maybe aren't so familiar with the farm. So is there within this week sort of that capacity to talk about, any kids that end up joining you on the farm?
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Having that conversation, if it's visitors, or maybe you have a hired worker that has children that might bring them along, cousins that come in from town or the city to come to visit, all kids are kids, right? Doesn't matter. Right. So it's important to have those conversations with any kids that are on your farm. And we do see that, under the age of 4, the reason why most kids are killed is that they're ran over, right? And then over that, it's rollovers. And that usually means that there were extra riders on a piece of equipment, or maybe riding in a place they shouldn't be, like, on a skid steer, bucket of a tractor, those sorts of places. So, that conversation, I grew up on a farm. I love that I have that, farm kid background, and, my family still farms, and still have nieces and nephews on the farm. Right. And, that's a conversation that we continually have to have is, they are amazing. They're growing up in these beautiful farms and these, wonderful places. But we want them to grow up, and we want them to succeed and thrive. And so that means protecting them the best way we can. And that means not putting them in shrink wrap and bubble wrapping them. That doesn't mean that. It means, mitigating risks, having conversations, and really taking that evaluation of being, of whether it's a visitor to your farm or your own farm kid, being like, what are safe things that we could do together? How can I show the love of agriculture in a safe way? How do I get them to respect, things, the hazards on our farm? Can we identify these hazards together? So yeah, it's a week for all kids that might visit or live on a farm.
How important is it that, as the adults on the farm, we show that culture of safety, from the get-go?
That's a great. I love that you use that word, culture of safety, and that's so integral, and that's what CAS has really always been about. Is the culture shift, the change. I remember when I was a kid growing up. Oh gosh, I'm going to date myself, but the '90s. And it was always kind of a bit of a pride, being like, oh yeah, I lost a finger and blah, 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 right? Like this conversation about, how tough I am and how long I work and how exhausted I am and how, I care so much about the farm. I'm willing to put my own person, my own health, my own safety at risk. Mm-hmm. And that is just such a strange way to think about, agriculture, and such a strange way to think about the family farm. When I think about family farms that are thriving, successful, they're farms that look after themselves. They look after their people first, right? And that means that, the farmers on that farm, mom, dad, uncle, auntie, grandpa, grandma, whomever are out there farming, they're looking after themselves. They're getting adequate sleep, adequate nutrition. They're checking in with each other, in terms of mental health. They're addressing hazards as they come up. They're not taking shortcuts, and they're having those real, sometimes hard conversations. You don't always want to say, to each other, hey, I noticed what you've done, isn't really that safe. Mm-hmm. And I'm worried about you. That's a kind of a hard conversation to have. And, I'm, as I get older, I'm less afraid to say those things, and sometimes, it can be met with maybe some derision or, some dismissal, but having those conversations over and over again, it's about caring and sharing and loving each other, and it's about growing that farm.
That is Robin Anderson of CASA. I encourage you to go to RealAgriculture.com to hear that entire interview and all the other stuff that we do on a weekly basis, indeed. If you have any feedback, send us an email, shaney@RealAgriculture.com. Thanks for listening to Real Ag on the Weekend here on 650 CKOM and 980 CGME.